The sun was slowly descending over the golden expanse of the pastures, painting the sky in shades of orange and purple, as if nature itself knew that the night would bring not only the silence of crickets, but also the heavy secrets buried in those lands. The Valenka estate was more than a property. It was an empire built on the sweat of others, political power, and a legacy spanning generations. At the top of a hill, the main house dominated the horizon, imposing with its wide verandas, whitewashed walls, and tall windows reflecting the day's last glow. There lived Antonio Valenka, the landowner, a man with a stern face, thick mustache, and hands that rarely got dirty, yet carried the authority of someone who had always commanded and never had to obey. Further down, near the corrals and fields where the cattle lowed in a slow symphony, stood the modest house of the foreman. Joachim, the farm's foreman, was a man of few words and many callous hands. Since his youth, he had served the Valenka family, and over the years had learned that his place was not beside the master, but behind him, ensuring the farm ran like clockwork. His lean, strong figure, often leaning on the wooden fence, conveyed both the resignation of someone accepting his destiny and the firmness of someone harboring a truth yet to be revealed. That afternoon, Joachim watched the sunset leaning against the fence, his worn hat on his head, when his son Miguel approached with hurried steps. The young man carried in his eyes the flame of youth, restless, impatient, dreaming. Miguel, unlike his father, would not accept a life of subservience. He was not content with being the foreman's son. He had ambition, courage, and a quiet rebellion that often earned him severe scoldings. "Father," Miguel said, taking a deep breath, "don't you see? While we toil down here, the colonel's son rides his horse just to show he owns everything. This isn't right." Joachim did not respond immediately. His eyes followed a figure on the horizon. Ricardo Valenka, the landowner's eldest son, crossing the fields on a fine horse, posture erect, gaze haughty. His silhouette, framed against the blazing sky, looked like that of a king inspecting unseen subjects. "Miguel," Joachim replied, his voice firm but weary, "everyone is born with the burden God gives them. Ours is this. Theirs is another." The young man clenched his fists. "Burden? No, father. What they have isn't a burden. It's privilege. And what we have is a prison disguised as a fence." As father and son argued, from the top of the veranda, Antonio Valenka watched the scene with narrowed eyes. Beside him, Helena, his wife, elegant in a light dress with jewelry that shimmered in the golden light, held a glass of wine between her delicate fingers. She was a woman of imposing presence, but cold as marble. Unlike her husband, who exuded rustic authority, Helena moved with the subtlety of one who manipulates the invisible. Many of the cruelest decisions came from her, though few dared to suspect it. "Look, Antonio," she said, subtly pointing toward Joachim and Miguel. "The boy is no longer content with his father's shadow. This rebellion could be a problem." The landowner grunted without taking his eyes off the field. "Problems are never lacking. As long as they work and obey, they are useful. When they stop, we'll know what to do." Helena smiled faintly, as one who keeps a plan hidden. Inside the main house, Beatrice, the couple's daughter, watched the scene through the window. Unlike her brother Ricardo, who had inherited their father's arrogance and their mother's coldness, Beatrice had a curious heart and restless soul. Her eyes lingered on Miguel down below, and a forbidden spark flared within her. There was something about that simple young man, that upright posture of defiance, that attracted her more than any wealth surrounding her. Ricardo, in turn, approached the window, noticing his sister's gaze. Words were unnecessary. He understood immediately. A scornful smile curved his lips. So Beatrice, already tired of the boys from town, and now aiming for foreman's son. His voice was a venomous whisper. "Be careful. Daddy doesn't like mixing." Beatrice blushed but did not look away. "Mind your own life, Ricardo." He chuckled softly, a laugh carrying the promise of poison. The night wind began to blow when at the edge of the estate, an unknown figure watched everything from a distance. Mounted on a dark horse, hat pulled low to hide his face, the man remained still for long minutes, like a living shadow. When he finally turned his reins and departed, He left behind the sense that the Valenka estate was about to be shaken by something far greater than a rebellious son's pride or a cold mother's secrets. High above, the walls of the main house held more than lavish dinners and sharp conversations. They contained documents, diaries, and buried memories that, if revealed, could topple everything Antonio Valenka believed he had built with firm hands and an iron fist. For now, however, night settled in, and each character returned to their role. The landowner on his throne, the foreman at the fence, the children on a collision course, and a hidden truth that throbbed like a wound ready to open. The morning sun rose lazily over the Valenka ranch, spilling golden light across the tall grass, swaying in the wind. The cattle lowed, the scent of damp earth mixed with the metallic clatter of hooves, striking hard ground. It was the start of another day's work, and for Miguel and the other ranch hands, that meant sweat, dust, and orders handed down from above. Miguel pulled hard on the rope of a restless calf, straining with strength and skill to keep control. The animal fought back, its body jerking with fury. Miguel dug his boots into the soil, muscles burning with the effort. Around him, the other ranch hands watched, some laughing, others cheering him on. Joaquim, the foreman, appeared in the distance, his stern gaze sharp as ever, a look that demanded perfection, though it offered no praise. That was when Ricardo Valenka rode up on his purebred horse, flanked by two friends from the city. They were young like him, their clothes far too clean for a cattle pen, boots polished, laughter dripping with scorn. Ricardo wore the same arrogant smile that had long since become his trademark. "Well, look at that," he called, tugging the reins as he stopped before the corral. The foreman's son playing cowboy. His friends burst into loud laughter, the sound cutting through the air like a slap. Miguel lifted his head, eyes flashing with rage, but stayed silent. He focused on the calf, still fighting to get free. Ricardo leaned forward in the saddle, resting his arm on his knee. "Hey, Miguel." His voice dripped with irony. "Want me to get down and show you how it's done? Or should I have someone bring you a lighter rope, so those weak arms of yours don't tire out?" The laughter swelled. One friend whistled, the other clapped, as if enjoying a show. Miguel's blood boiled. "I don't need your help," he shot back through gritted teeth, eyes locked on the animal. Ricardo laughed. "Of course you do. You always will. That's the fate of those born to obey. Doesn't matter how hard you fight, Miguel, in the end, you'll always be just a foreman's son." The words hit Miguel like stones to the chest. At that moment, the calf gave a violent lurch, nearly knocking him to the ground. Ricardo seized a chance to strike again. "See that? Even the calf doesn't respect you. How can anyone else?" His friends howled with laughter. One, bolder than the rest, added, "Careful, Ricardo. If the calf keeps it up, it might mistake him for a real cowboy." The chorus of laughter was deafening. Miguel, burning with fury and humiliation, suddenly released the rope. The calf bolted across the corral, kicking up dust and sending ranch hands scrambling for safety. Silence fell for a moment, broken only by Ricardo's hoarse neighing. Miguel walked straight to the fence and stopped in front of Ricardo, his eyes, blazing, locked on the young master's, who still smiled with contempt. "Laugh all you want, Ricardo," Miguel said, his voice low but steady. "One day, you'll swallow every word." Ricardo's smile twisted into a mocking sneer. "Oh, I'm counting the days. But until then, remember this. The ground you walk on is mine. The shadow over your head, it's mine. Even the air you breathe is because I allow it." His friends clapped as if it were a rehearsed performance. Miguel drew in a deep breath, fighting the urge to leap at him. Just then, Joaquim appeared, and the severe glare he gave his son was enough to hold him back. "Miguel!" Joaquim barked, his commanding voice cutting through the tension. "Come with me. Now." The boy obeyed, heavy steps carrying him toward his father, while Ricardo's laughter and that of his friends echoed behind him like a curse. When they reached a quieter spot, Joaquim gripped Miguel's shoulder, staring him in the eyes. "Have you lost your mind?" he scolded. "Were you about to start a fight in front of everyone?" "He humiliated me, father," Miguel shouted back. "He always does, as if I'm worth less than him. And you think yelling proves otherwise?" Joaquim's voice was hard, grave. "No, Miguel. A man proves himself with deeds, not empty words. Miguel looked away, frustrated. So what then? Do I just swallow it down for the rest of my life? Joaquim drew a deep breath, eyes drifting to the horizon where the big house stood tall. Sometimes life forces us to wait. But never forget this, son. Every man carries within him a time. And when that time comes, nothing can stop it. The words did little to ease Miguel's pain, but they ignited an even greater fire in his chest. Until now, he had only resented the difference between himself and the landowner's sons. But now, he swore he would not rest until he proved he was no less than any of them. From the veranda of the big house, Beatrice had been watching, hidden behind a curtain. Her heart tightened with every cruel laugh that rose from the corral. When Miguel lifted his eyes to challenge Ricardo, something stirred inside her, a force that drew her closer to the simple, defiant young man. That was when Helena, her mother, entered the room. Her cold eyes narrowed, catching the look on her daughter's face. "What are you staring at so intently, Beatrice?" she asked, voice soft but cutting. Beatrice flushed and quickly pulled the curtain closed. "Nothing, mother. Just the movement in the corral." Helena's gaze lingered, suspicious, but she pressed no further. She knew the greatest secrets revealed themselves when least expected. And in that moment, inside the big house and across the ranch, a web of feelings, resentments, and forbidden desires was already taking shape, preparing the ground for a war that would forever change their fate. Night fell over the Valenca ranch like a heavy shroud, silencing the fields that by day pulsed with the labor of the ranch hands. The full moon rose high, casting silver light over the corrals, the fences, and the big house, now resting under the glow of a few lanterns lit on its verandas. A gentle breeze carried the scent of damp grass, earth, and fresh brewed coffee drifting from the kitchen. Miguel lay restless in his narrow bed, tossing from side to side. Ricardo's words, dripping with venom, still echoed in his mind. The cruel laughter of the landowner's friends stung deeper than any blow could. Yet, amid the anger and humiliation, one memory soothed him, the look in Beatrice's eyes. He had noticed, even from afar, that she was watching from the big house window. And in that gaze was something different, a glimmer that made him believe not everyone saw him as less. Unable to bear the storm inside him, Miguel rose quietly, pulled on his boots, and slipped outside. He walked the familiar fence where he so often leaned to stare at the horizon. The moon lit the land with an almost magical clarity. Then he heard it, light footsteps brushing through the grass. He turned, and his heart jolted. Beatrice stood there, wrapped in a pale shawl that softened her delicate features. She moved slowly, as if each step were an act of defiance. Their eyes met, and for a moment neither spoke. The silence between them was heavy, charged with tension and unspoken desire. "What are you doing here, Beatrice?" Miguel asked, his voice low but steady. "You shouldn't be out of the big house at this hour." She drew a breath, stepping closer. "Perhaps I shouldn't, but I couldn't stay still. I saw what happened today. Miguel, I saw the way Ricardo and the others treated you." Miguel turned his gaze aside, ashamed. It wasn't the first time, and it won't be the last. That's just how things are. Beatrice reached out, her hand brushing his arm, urging him to look at her again. "It shouldn't be. You are not less than anyone here." Her touch burned against his skin. Miguel stepped back, not from lack of will, but from fear. "If someone sees us," he whispered, "you know your father would never allow it." Beatrice smiled, a smile both tender and daring. "Sometimes, Miguel, we have to take risks." Silence stretched once more, broken only by the distant lowing of cattle and the whisper of the wind. Miguel's heart pounded faster with every breath. Being so close to her was dangerous, but irresistible. At last, unable to hold back, he murmured, "If my father finds out, he'll scold me. If yours finds out, he'll drive me from the ranch." "Then let him not find out," she answered, eyes shining under the moonlight. "The secret is ours." Miguel drew a deep breath, clinging to reason, but reason felt like a luxury he no longer had. He reached out, and Beatrice took his hand, her grip soft yet certain. That simple touch sealed something greater than words. Suddenly, the crack of a branch made them pull apart. Both scanned the shadows, but no one appeared. Still, the fear of discovery lingered like smoke in the air. "I must go back," Beatrice whispered, her voice trembling. "If my mother notices I'm gone, she'll suspect." "Go," Miguel said, his tone softer than he intended. "But come back tomorrow." She smiled, a secret, promising smile. "I will." And then she slipped into the darkness, leaving Miguel alone, his heart ablaze, his mind at war. He knew this path was dangerous, but he also knew there was no turning back. Once her eyes had found his, their fates were bound. From that moment on, they were partners in a secret powerful enough to set the ranch on fire. Inside the big house, Beatrice crept through a side door, but she wasn't unseen. Helena waited in the sitting room, posture flawless, a sentinel of the night. Her cold eyes tracked every movement of her daughter. "Where were you, Beatrice?" she asked, her voice too soft to hide the blade beneath. Beatrice held her breath, struggling for calm. "I needed air. I went to walk near the veranda." Helena lingered in silence. Each second stretched like an eternity. At last, she rose, moving close, her gaze sharp and unyielding. Finally, she spoke. "Remember this, my daughter. Some walks at night lead to dangerous places." She turned and ascended the stairs, leaving Beatrice trembling, her heart racing. She knew her mother suspected, and Helena was not a woman who easily let suspicions fade. Meanwhile, Ricardo lay in his room, a smile curling on his lips. He too had noticed the exchange of glances in the corral, and unlike his mother, he had no intention of merely watching. To him, that secret was a weapon, one he would use sooner or later. At dawn, the familiar melody of the Valenka farm returned, the roosters crowing, the cattle lowing, and the steady rhythm of ranch hands starting their day. The golden light of the sun filtered through the curtains of the big house, but inside, the shadows were heavier than any midnight. Helena Valenka moved through the halls with quiet, deliberate steps. It was far too early to be awake, but she never truly slept. Her thoughts were restless predators, pacing in their cage. She entered her husband's office, a wide room lined with shelves of leather-bound books and old documents that smelled of dust and time. Antonio rarely allowed anyone near his papers, but Helena had her own keys and her own secrets. She closed the door behind her and pulled from a hidden drawer a dark wooden box, its carvings worn smooth with age. Kneeling before it, she took a deep breath, as if the object itself carried a pulse. When she lifted the lid, brittle documents, yellowed letters, and a weathered leather diary came into view. Her fingers hovered until they stopped on one fragile deed. The parchment, frayed at the edges, bore an official seal and a name, faded but unmistakable: Joaquim Alves. Helena narrowed her eyes. Joaquim, the loyal foreman, the man who had spent his entire life serving the Valenkas, had no idea that once, long ago, this land could have been his. The truth was merciless. Decades earlier, through deception and influence, Antonio's father had stolen these acres from Joaquim, and Helena, still young then, had witnessed it all. She had stayed silent, out of loyalty to her husband and fear of losing the life of comfort she had secured. But now, as Miguel became the target of Ricardo's cruelty, something stirred within her. Not compassion. Helena was no stranger to cold calculations, but strategy. She knew that secrets were sharper than knives, and this one could become her most dangerous weapon yet. "A name! A single piece of paper!" she whispered, pressing the deed to her chest. Enough to bring down an empire. Out in the yard, Miguel worked beside his father, preparing cattle for vaccination. Joaquim was focused and stern, unaware of the fire smoldering in his son's eyes. Miguel labored in silence, vowing that one day he would face Ricardo on equal ground. From the veranda, Beatrice watched. Her heart pulled her toward Miguel, but her mind felt the weight of her mother's piercing gaze and her brother's poison. And then Ricardo broke the morning's rhythm. He strode down the stairs, mounted his horse, and rode straight toward the corrals, his smirk daring confrontation. "What's the matter, Miguel?" he called, voice dripping with contempt. Still brooding over yesterday's beating with words? Some ranch hands laughed uneasily. Others lowered their heads. Miguel straightened and met Ricardo's eyes without flinching. What happened yesterday was just the beginning. Ricardo! Life has a way of turning tables. Ricardo leaned forward in the saddle, his grin sharp. Careful, foreman's boy. Sometimes when life turns, it crushes those who dream too high. The air grew heavy until Joaquim stepped between them. Not here, he said firmly. Not in front of the men. Ricardo chuckled, pulled his reins, and rode off, but the promise in his glare was clear. Revenge. From the veranda, Helena watched with icy calm. The rivalry was spiraling, and soon not even Antonio would be able to contain it. Perhaps the time had come to release just enough of the truth in the right hands. That very afternoon, she sent a discreet message to a man in town, an old acquaintance who kept copies of papers and memories from when the Valencas first stole the land. With his return, embers long buried would ignite once more. Meanwhile, Beatrice seized her chance to escape. Pretending to visit a friend in the village, she slipped toward the backfields, where Miguel was repairing a broken fence. Their reunion was brief but intense. "I thought you wouldn't come," Miguel said, setting his hammer aside. "I told you I would," she replied, smiling softly. Miguel exhaled, troubled. "Beatrice, you don't understand. Ricardo won't let this rest. He already knows something's different between us." "Then let him know," she shot back. "I won't let him decide my life." He clasped her hand, holding it tightly. "But your father, your mother?" For a moment, Beatrice faltered, remembering her mother's icy stare the night before. Then she lifted her chin. "If they find out, so be it. I'll face them." A distant rumble of thunder warned of a storm gathering on the horizon. The two locked eyes, knowing the world seemed determined to conspire against their love. In the big house, Helena opened the old diary once again. For the first time in years, she put pen to paper. Not a confession, but a reminder to herself. When the truth surfaces, it will already be too late for Antonio. And perhaps then, it will be my time to rule alone. The storm roared in the distance, and the Valenca farm sank deeper into a sea of secrets, forbidden love, and rivalries ready to explode. The sky over the Valenca farm dawned gray, as if it already knew this morning would not be ordinary. The breeze carried the scent of damp earth, and even the cattle's distant murmur seemed subdued, like the land itself was holding its breath. Miguel, still restless from a secret meeting the night before, walked toward the corral with cautious steps. The day began with routine, but the air was heavy. Ricardo, sour since early morning, had spent the night awake, replaying his sister's words and his mother's strange behavior. Something in Helena had shifted, and he suspected she wasn't as cold and implacable as she pretended to be. His eyes now carried a storm of anger and suspicion, as though he were piecing together a puzzle he had long ignored. Miguel was busy separating calves when Ricardo arrived, flanked by two friends from town. Without a word, he mounted his horse and rode straight toward the foreman's son, his intentions sharper than ever. Humiliation. "Take a look, boys," Ricardo said, his voice raised so every ranch hand could hear. "Little Miguel here thinks he can stand shoulder to shoulder with us. Isn't that amusing?" Miguel lifted his gaze, meeting Ricardo's eyes with quiet defiance. "I don't need to be like you, Ricardo," he answered, steady and firm. Ricardo leaned down in the saddle, bringing his face close. "Oh, but you want, don't you? Everyone craves what they can't have. The problem is you were born to obey, Miguel, and life won't change that." One of his friends laughed. The men watching shifted uncomfortably, some slipping away from the scene. Miguel drew a deep breath, fighting to contain his anger, though his fists clenched tight at his sides. "You know, Miguel," Ricardo's tone dropped to a cutting whisper, "I'm starting to think my mother is hiding something from me. She watches more than she lets on. She keeps secrets, ones that could change everything here." The words froze Miguel in place. Ricardo had no idea of the weight behind them, but Miguel did, and he knew he couldn't react, not yet. Then Ricardo snapped his fingers, summoning the ranch hands. "Let's see how you handle this, foreman's boy." Two men dragged out a restless calf, one that had broken free of the corral more than once. Ricardo grinned cruelly. "Take him, Miguel. Let's see if you can manage on your own." Miguel's chest pounded. The animal snorted and kicked, wild with energy. Miguel threw the rope, trying to steer it, but the calf bucked violently, dust rising around them, hooves pounding like drums in his chest. Ricardo and his friends howled with laughter, egging on his struggle. "This isn't right," Miguel shouted, face flushed with effort and shame. "Enough!" Ricardo laughed louder. "This is your lesson, Miguel. Learn your place. And trust me, you got a lot left to learn." The calf lunged, yanking him down. Miguel crashed into the dirt, rolling, the sting of humiliation cutting deeper than any bruise. Some ranch hands rushed to help, but Joaquim, watching from a distance, held firm. His voice rang out like a whip. "Get up! Don't let them see weakness." Miguel staggered to his feet, covered in dust, rage burning in his chest. He locked eyes with Ricardo, his breath ragged. The hatred was there, but so was something else. A silent vow. He would not always be just a foreman's son. Every insult, every cruel laugh, was fuel. One day, the tables would turn. From the veranda, Beatriz had witnessed everything. Her heart ached for Miguel, but it also swelled with pride. She saw the fire inside him, and she knew he would not break. This was only the beginning. In the study, Helena leafed through the old documents again, papers that carried the true story of the Valenca land. Hearing Ricardo's suspicion had made her smile faintly. The game was becoming interesting. Perhaps it was time to use his doubts, to guide him like a pawn on her chessboard. That day, the Valenca farm became more than a stage for labor. It was a theater of humiliation, of heavy stares and unspoken promises, revenge simmering, secrets clawing toward the surface, and the certainty that nothing would ever be the same again. And Miguel, standing tall despite the dirt and pain, learned a bitter truth. On the Valenca land, brute strength wasn't enough. To survive, he would need patience, cunning, and the courage to wait for the perfect moment to strike back. The sun sank lazily over the Valenca ranch, spilling golden rays to the trees, stretching long shadows across the corral and pasture. Miguel had chosen his meeting place with care, an abandoned reservoir, tucked away from prying eyes. Here, surrounded by silence and fading daylight, they could forget the weight of social lines and the tension that haunted every corner of the estate. Beatriz arrived with light steps, clutching the edge of her shawl against the breeze. Her eyes shone with anticipation and fear, knowing a single misstep could expose their secret. Miguel leaned against a fallen log, arms crossed, trying to look calm though his heart pounded in his chest. "I thought you wouldn't come," Miguel said, masking his nerves with a firm voice. "I told you I would," Beatriz answered with a soft smile. "But we have to be quick." Ricardo's been watching more closely than ever. Miguel exhaled, his gaze fixed on the glowing horizon. "I know. Every step we take could be the last we take together." They walked to the edge of the reservoir, where the still water mirrored the sky, and the fading light painted golden ripples across the surface. Beatriz sat on a stone, Miguel kneeling beside her just to feel her nearness. For a fleeting moment, it was intimacy untouched, an escape from the storm around them, but their peace was short-lived. From a hilltop, Ricardo watched in secret, mounted on his prized horse. His dark eyes followed every movement with burning obsession. Each stolen smile, every brush of hands, stoked a vengeance that pulsed hotter by the second. "So this is it," Ricardo muttered, voice low and venomous. "Beatriz tangled with a foreman's son. Let's see how long he survives in that trap." Unaware of his presence, Miguel drew closer. "You shouldn't be here," he whispered. "If anyone finds out—" "Sure," she cut in, taking his hand. "For now, we're safe. Just be here with me." The moment swelled with danger. A branch snapped in the distance, and both turned sharply. Miguel's chest tightened. "Who's there?" he called, cautious. Ricardo slipped behind a trunk, staying hidden, a cruel smile creeping across his face. He knew he didn't need to reveal himself, not yet. The fear of being caught was its own poison, one that gave him power. His mind was already plotting. "That boy thinks he can steal my sister," he hissed, fists tightening. "He'll learn everything comes with a price." By the water's edge, Miguel and Beatriz resumed their hushed voices. clinging to the fragile safety of stolen time. Every word, every glance, carried more weight than they dared admit. Desire laced with fear. They knew they were playing with fire, and the flames were closing in. Back at the big house, Helena stood by a window, her eyes trained on the land though she pretended otherwise. From afar, she noticed Ricardo's hidden watch and allowed herself a satisfied smile. Her son was beginning to move with cunning of his own. Every step he took could become another piece in her private game. As night descended, Miguel and Beatriz parted in haste. She promised a return, though urgency and dread gave their farewell a deeper intensity. Each stepped back toward the big house, and the workers' quarters carried the weight of a secret fraying at the edges. Ricardo was watching, and Ricardo never forgave. Darkness wrapped the ranch, heavy with storm-like tension. Love grew in the shadows, but so did danger. Miguel knew mistakes could no longer be afforded. Beatriz knew her defiance demanded a cost. And Ricardo was ready to pay in blood to crush what he saw as betrayal. The moon rose high, silvering Miguel's lonely path home. Every shadow loomed darker, every sound sharper. Yet within him, a vow took root, silent, unshakable. He would not remain a pawn. One day, he would turn the game upside down, whatever it took. The morning sky hung heavy, swollen with storm clouds. On the Valenka ranch, the air itself felt weighted, thick with unease. Miguel had risen early, his mind still tangled in the memory of the secret meeting with Beatriz the night before. Anxiety and excitement warred within him. He knew a single misstep could bring everything crashing down. Meanwhile, in the stables, Ricardo was sharpening his plan with methodical precision. He studied Miguel's every move, his routine, his weaknesses. His expression was dark, his gaze sharpened by equal parts anger and obsession. To him, Miguel wasn't just a nuisance. He was a direct insult to the Valenka name. "Today," Ricardo muttered, clenching his fist, "he'll learn what it means to challenge my family." He summoned two of his most trusted men, loyal ranch hands who never questioned his orders. Watch him. Make him believe nothing's changed. But when the time is right, Ricardo's lips twisted into a cruel smile. His fall will be certain. Unaware of the trap, Miguel began his daily chores, helping Joaquin manage the restless herd. The foreman, noticing the storm of worry in his son's eyes, paused with a frown. "Be careful today, Miguel," he warned, voice edged with unease. "Something doesn't feel right." Miguel only nodded, forcing away the heaviness pressing on his chest. He needed control. He couldn't let Ricardo see him falter. While Miguel struggled with a particularly unruly calf, Ricardo watched from behind a tall fence. At his subtle signal, his men shifted into place near the side gate, waiting like shadows for the order to strike. "Now," Ricardo whispered, his voice dripping malice. As Miguel wrestled with the animal, one of the men brushed against him, just enough to send him off balance. He stumbled and fell hard into the mud, the cold earth swallowing him in humiliation. Ricardo dismounted slowly, savoring every second, each step deliberate. His voice carried across the pen, sharp with mockery. "Looks like you're in trouble, Miguel. I always believed the Valenka ranch was built on discipline. Yet you can't seem to learn your place." Miguel lifted his head, fury blazing in his chest. "You can knock me down, Ricardo," he answered firmly, pride burning in his throat. "But don't think you'll ever break me. One day, you'll pay for every bit of this." Ricardo laughed, the sound cold, hollow, cruel. It echoed against the wooden beams and cattle calls, leaving a chill in the air. "We'll see, Miguel. We'll see," he murmured, climbing back onto his horse. He rode off slowly, leaving behind not just mud and shame, but a warning that their war had only begun. From a distance, Beatriz had seen it all. Her heart clenched tight at the sight of Miguel's humiliation, fear nodding with determination. Loving him put them both at risk, but she knew Miguel wouldn't yield. Joaquin pulled his son to his feet, his face stern but unsurprised. He gripped Miguel's shoulder firmly. "Remember this, boy. Strength isn't everything. Intelligence, patience, and courage, that's what decides who wins a game." Miguel drew in a breath, mud clinging to his clothes, his jaw set hard. Inside, a vow burned hotter than ever. Every attempt to crush him only fueled his resolve. Ricardo didn't realize it yet, but with every humiliation, he was forging an enemy who would never stop rising. Upstairs in the main house, Helena watched the commotion unfold with a calculating smile. Ricardo's arrogance, his impulsive cruelty, it was all so predictable, and predictable men could be used. The secrets of the land, Joaquin's past, Miguel's true place in this story. She would twist them all to her advantage when the time came. As dusk approached, the weight on the ranch only grew heavier. Every glance, every word, every silence carried the spark of something larger. And in the shadows, Miguel and Beatriz braced themselves, not just for Ricardo's wrath, but for the truths buried deep beneath the Valenca legacy. Truths that, once uncovered, could tear their lives apart forever. The day broke under a gray sky above the Valenca ranch, a cool breeze carrying the scent of damp earth that promised rain. Miguel still felt the mud clinging to his clothes from Ricardo's latest humiliation, but something stronger had taken root inside him, a silent determination never again to bow before the family's injustices. As he walked toward the corral to tend the herd, Helena was already awake, seated in her study with a steaming cup of coffee. Old documents lay neatly arranged across her desk. She knew the web of intrigue was tightening, yet within it, she saw opportunity, the chance to seize absolute control over the ranch's future. Helena was not a woman easily intimidated. She observed family and workers alike as though engaged in a game of mental chess. Every glance, every hesitation could be exploited. Ricardo, reckless and impatient, had yet to grasp that true power belonged to those who wielded caution and patience. Quietly, she began to shape her intervention. Miguel was both a threat and a tool, dangerous, yet useful to position correctly against Ricardo. The key lay in the secret she guarded. The true origin of the ranch, the documents exposing Joaquin's past, and the loyalty of a handful of workers who might one day shift the balance. Meanwhile, Miguel worked beside Joaquin, who watched him carefully, noting the fire of determination growing in his son. "What you need now, Miguel," Joaquin said firmly with a trace of warmth, "is to use what you know and what you see. This isn't a battle of brute strength. It's a battle of patience, intelligence, and timing." Miguel nodded, feeling the weight of responsibility and the echo of his private vow. Every humiliation was no longer defeat. It was preparation, a step toward the moment he would turn the game in his favor. Ricardo, in his arrogance, didn't realize that with each cruel act, he was shaping Miguel into the very adversary who might one day rise against him. But the storm on the ranch wasn't confined to the brothers. From a distance, Beatriz watched Miguel, her heart racing as she tried to remain discreet. She knew Helena's sharp eyes missed little, and that every secret meeting risked discovery. Yet her love for Miguel burned brighter than her fear. Helena, sensing Beatriz's involvement, decided on a subtler play. She sent word to an ally in the city, requesting details about recent family dealings. Information that could sway Ricardo or Miguel at just the right moment. Each piece of knowledge was another move on her invisible board. By late afternoon, dark clouds gathered on the horizon, heavy with the promise of storm. Ricardo, blind to the strings his own mother was pulling, was already planning his next ambush for Miguel. But Helena's quiet maneuvers were in motion, reshaping the balance of power without his knowledge. Out in the fields, Miguel walked the distant fences as the first drop of rain cooled his skin. He lifted his face to the sky, breathing deeply, feeling alive. Each trial no longer seemed a burden, but a chance to grow stronger, to learn, to ready himself for the inevitable day he would meet Ricardo on equal ground. As the rain thickened and lightning split the darkening sky, the Valenca ranch became a stage for silent war, a battlefield of power, secrets, and strategy, a place where every move would shape destiny, and where the storms to come promised confrontation, revelation, and change no one could yet foresee. The rain fell in relentless sheets over the Valenca ranch, turning dirt paths into slick mud and saturating the air with a heavy, humid weight. Miguel, still caked in the remnants of previous humiliations, moved with steady steps among the animals, striving to maintain routine despite the storm. Each drop that struck his face felt like a reminder that, just like the weather, his life was on the verge of a sudden change. From a high ridge, Ricardo watched under the shade of a wide leather hat. His dark eyes scanned the ranch with calculated precision, tracking Miguel's every move, Joaquim's cautious oversight, and Beatrice's subtle approaches. Sleep had eluded him for nights as he plotted new ways to humiliate the boy and cement his control. Today, he muttered under his breath, jaw tight, everything will be different. No mistakes. No hesitation. On the other side of the ranch, Helena silently monitored both Ricardo and Miguel, keeping her distance. She knew her son acted impulsively, but this impulse could serve her purposes. To test loyalties, expose weaknesses, and plant seeds of doubt. A faint smile touched her lips. The storm was not only in the sky, but in every heart on the ranch. Miguel, focused on the corral, noticed something amiss. A section of the fence was looser than it should be, as if deliberately tampered with. A shiver ran down his spine. Ricardo's hand was likely behind this new scheme. "Joaquim," he called softly, pointing to the compromised fence. The capataz approached, inspecting it carefully. A trap. Someone wants you hurt, or at least thrown off balance. Miguel drew in a deep breath, mingling fear with fury, yet keeping his composure. "Then we'll make sure the next move is mine," he said, eyes blazing with resolve. Meanwhile, Ricardo watched from his hiding spot, unaware that Helena scrutinized every action. She knew her son was about to execute his trap, yet she let him proceed, ready to intervene at the right moment. Beatrice, aware of the danger, crept toward Miguel. "I need to warn you," she whispered. "He's planning something big today." Miguel nodded, grasping the gravity of the moment. "Then we'll be ready. I won't be anyone's pawn anymore." The rain intensified, mingling with the lowing of the cattle and the distant roll of thunder. Ricardo advanced, directing his trusted workers to press Miguel toward the unstable fence. But Miguel, anticipating the move, dodged with skill and agility, avoiding the disaster his rival had intended. "This isn't over, Miguel," Ricardo shouted, his voice slicing through the storm. "You will pay for everything." Miguel, drenched in rain and mud but undaunted, met the challenge head-on. "Try all you want, Ricardo. One day, this ranch won't be your playground anymore." From a distance, Helena observed, a satisfied smile on her lips. Every reaction, every maneuver, was a piece on her grand chessboard. The revelation of the true inheritance, the lands that rightfully belonged to Joaquim, had yet to come. Once the truth emerged, neither Miguel nor Ricardo, nor anyone else could fully control the outcome. Beatrice, shivering from cold and emotion, grasped Miguel's hand briefly. "We must be careful," she murmured. "His next move could be even more dangerous." Miguel nodded, feeling the weight of responsibility and the silent promise he had made, to turn the tables, protect Beatrice, and eventually claim what was justly theirs. The storm raging over the Valenca ranch was merely a mirror of the chaos approaching the hearts and secrets of those who lived there. In that moment, the Valenca ranch ceased to be just a place of work and routine. It became a stage of intrigue, forbidden love, and escalating rivalry, where every decision could determine who survived, who was humiliated, and who would ultimately take control of their story. The timid dawn over the Valenca farm carried an air heavy with expectation. Dense clouds filtered the sunlight, casting grayish tones over the corral and pastures, while the scent of wet earth and freshly arranged hay mingled with the aroma of fresh coffee. But inside the big house, the atmosphere was different, heavy, silent, and thick with tension. Helena Valenca sat in her office, leafing through old documents, each gesture calculated, each glance measuring possibilities. She knew the moment of change was near. Ricardo, impatient and arrogant, walked through the hallways of the big house, restless, unaware of his mother's subtlety. "Mother," he said, trying to sound casual but brimming with nervousness, "have you been watching Miguel? He seems different, more confident. Strange." Helena slowly raised her eyes, her expression calm, almost maternal, but with a glint of cunning. "Trust me, son. Miguel has his place, but the eyes don't always see everything that happens," she replied, leaving ambiguity in the air and heightening Ricardo's paranoia. In the corral, Miguel adjusted the workers' and animals' routines, but every movement was strategic. He already understood that physical strength alone was enough. He needed intelligence, patience, and timing. Joaquim's watchful gaze remained on him, silent and vigilant. Beatrice, hidden in a nearby shadow, observed every gesture. The fear of being discovered mingled with a quiet hope that this could be the day everything changed. She remembered the promise she had made to Miguel. No obstacle, however great, could separate them. As the morning advanced, Helena decided to act. She discreetly sent copies of documents proving the rightful ownership of the land to an old ally, delicate information that could be used to manipulate Ricardo or give Miguel a strategic advantage. Ricardo, noticing that something was moving behind the scenes, began to feel paranoid. Every shadow seemed to hide a threat. Every gesture from Miguel seemed to carry secrets he still did not understand. "This can't be happening," he muttered, trembling with frustration. "No one fools me here, no one." Miguel, noticing his opponent's growing unease, began to mentally map his next move. He didn't want just to survive Ricardo's games. He wanted to turn the tide, earn respect, and protect Beatriz, while claiming the justice long denied to his family. The atmosphere on the farm became almost tangible. Intermittent rain mingled with the wind, the lowing of cattle, and the sounds of hurried workers' steps. Every exchanged glance, every strategic gesture, carried the promise that something big was about to explode. By late morning, Helena received news from her ally. A small smile curved her lips. The plan was working. Ricardo was vulnerable. Miguel was beginning to see opportunities, and the secret of the true inheritance hovered, invisible yet powerful, over everyone, like a shadow ready to rewrite the farm's history. Beatriz approached Miguel quietly, whispering, "Today could be the day, Miguel." He nodded, firm and determined. "Yes, Beatriz. Today we begin to change everything." Under the gray sky and the returning rain, the Valenka farm transformed into a chessboard where love, revenge, ambition, and secrets collided explosively, ready to decide the fate of everyone who lived there. The sun was beginning to set, painting the sky in shades of orange and purple. A cold wind blew, carrying the scent of wet earth, and the cattle started to stir with the approach of night. Miguel walked through the pen, adjusting the animals' routine, fully aware that the tension of the day had not yet subsided. Every movement was calculated, every step observed. Ricardo, impatient and full of rage, was plotting a new trap. He knew the past few days hadn't gone as he imagined, and that Miguel was becoming sharper. Determined not to lose control, he called 2 trusted laborers and hid them near a hay storage, ordering them to act at the right moment. "Today he'll learn," Ricardo muttered, his eyes gleaming with malice. "He thinks he can challenge my authority? Let's see how much he can take." Meanwhile, Helena watched from afar, sitting in the main house's office. She maintained the calm that only years of experience could bring. Ricardo was acting impulsively, like a boy trying to dominate the world, and every action he took could later be used to her advantage. A satisfied smile curved her lips. The storm of emotion sweeping the farm was exactly what she needed to move her pieces with precision. Miguel noticed something unusual. The hay in one of the stacks seemed unstable. A chill ran down his spine, reminding him of previous traps. He knew Ricardo would not miss the chance to try humiliating him again. He took a deep breath, assessed the terrain, and quickly devised a strategy. When the laborers appeared to pressure him, Miguel dodged with agility, using their own force against them. The hay toppled, raising a cloud of dust that concealed his movement, while he remained standing, breathing deeply. Ricardo, seeing his plan fail, furrowed his brow and punched the air, unable to believe what had just happened. "This isn't over," he shouted, his voice cutting through the wind. "You'll pay for this, Miguel." Miguel, wet and tired, kept his stance firm. "Try all you want," he replied, eyes fixed on his adversary. "But every trap only makes me stronger." Beatriz, hidden in the nearby shadows, struggled to breathe, anxious but at the same time relieved. She knew Miguel would not just endure. He was beginning to turn each challenge into a lesson. As tension grew in the pen, Helena decided to act subtly. She discreetly sent a message to an ally in town, requesting crucial information about the family's financial situation and possible documents that could shift the balance of power. Each piece of information was planned like a silent weapon, ready to be used at the exact right moment. The rain began to fall again, mixing with mud and the scent of wet hay. Ricardo, impatient, did not notice that his own arrogance was being manipulated by Helena, who observed every gesture, every expression with meticulous attention. Miguel, taking a deep breath, noticed Beatrice's presence and discreetly held her hand. "Today we learned something important," he said softly. "Strength doesn't always win. Strategy, patience, and courage make all the difference." And as the sky darkened, the farm transformed into a chessboard where every move could change the fate of everyone. Secrets, intrigues, and ambitions were about to collide, and Miguel felt, for the first time, that he could truly face the storm approaching. The sun began to set, painting the sky in shades of orange and purple. The wind blew cold, carrying the scent of wet earth, and the cattle grew restless as night approached. Miguel walked to the corral, adjusting the animals' routine, fully aware that the tension of the day had not yet subsided. Every movement was calculated, every step carefully observed. Ricardo, impatient and filled with rage, was plotting a new ambush. He knew the past few days had not gone as planned, and Miguel was becoming sharper, more cunning. Determined not to lose control, he called 2 trusted ranch hands and hid them near a hay storage area, instructing them to act at the perfect moment. "Today he'll learn," Ricardo muttered, his eyes glinting with malice. "He thinks he can challenge my authority? Let's see how much he can take." Meanwhile, Helena observed from afar, seated in the big house's office. She maintained the calm only years of experience could provide. Ricardo was acting impulsively, like a boy trying to dominate the world, and each of his actions could be used to her advantage later. A satisfied smile curved her lips. The storm of emotion sweeping the farm was exactly what she needed to move her pieces with precision. Miguel noticed something unusual. One of the hay piles seemed unstable. A chill ran down his spine, reminding him of previous traps. He knew Ricardo would not let the opportunity to humiliate him again slip by. He took a deep breath, analyzed the terrain, and quickly formulated a strategy. When the ranch hands appeared to corner him, Miguel dodged with agility, using their own momentum against him. The hay collapsed, raising a cloud of dust that concealed his action, while he remained standing, breathing deeply. Ricardo, seeing his plan fail, furrowed his brow and slammed his fist into the air, unable to believe what had just happened. "This isn't over," he shouted, his voice cutting through the wind. "You'll pay for this, Miguel." Miguel, wet and tired, held the ground firmly. "Try as much as you want," he replied, his gaze fixed on his opponent. "But every trap only makes me stronger." Beatrice, hidden in the nearby shadows, breathed with difficulty, anxious but also relieved. She knew that Miguel would not only endure, but was beginning to turn every challenge into a lesson. As the tension in the corral grew, Helena decided to act subtly. She discreetly sent a message to an ally in town, requesting crucial information about the family's financial situation and possible documents that could shift the balance of power. Every piece of information was planned like a silent weapon, ready to be used at the exact right moment. The rain began to fall again, mixing with the mud and the scent of wet hay. Ricardo, impatient, failed to notice that his own arrogance was being manipulated by Helena, who watched every gesture, every expression, with meticulous attention. Miguel, taking a deep breath, noticed Beatrice's presence and discreetly held her hand. "Today we learned something important," he said softly. "Strength doesn't always win. Strategy, patience, and courage make all the difference." And as the sky darkened, the farm transformed into a chessboard where every move could change everyone's fate. Secrets, intrigues, and ambitions were about to collide, and Miguel felt, for the first time, that he could truly face the approaching storm. The sky was heavy, on the verge of unleashing a powerful storm. As Miguel walked the corral, alert to every sound and movement across the farm, the days of humiliation and ambushes had left their marks, but they had also awakened a quiet strength within him. He knew Ricardo would not give up easily, and that Beatrice could be in danger if anything went out of control. Beatrice, sensing the approach of one of Ricardo's more subtle schemes, retreated to hide among the nearby trees. Her heart raced. The sense of danger was real, and every shadow seemed to transform into an enemy. She knew Miguel was close, but the fear of being discovered still gripped her. Ricardo, impatient and furious at the recent failures of his traps, stormed across the farm with heavy steps. He shouted orders to the ranch hands, attempting to restore the authority he felt slipping away. Every gesture, every move Miguel made seemed to personally challenge him, inflaming his desperation and pushing his decisions into reckless territory. "This can't be happening," Ricardo shouted, his face red with rage. "Miguel can't keep defying me like this." Meanwhile, Miguel analyzed the situation carefully, noting Ricardo's emotional state. The young landowner's desperation was his opportunity. He needed to act with intelligence, without rushing. One wrong move could put Beatriz at risk, and he could not allow that. Joaquim, watching from a distance, gave a quiet warning. "Remember, Miguel, courage without strategy is useless." Miguel took a deep breath and began executing a risky plan. He discreetly guided Ricardo and some of the ranch hands toward an area of the farm where the mud was deep but safe for those who knew the terrain. With subtle gestures, he manipulated the situation so that Ricardo would focus on controlling the environment, leaving gaps in his attention. Beatriz, hidden and watching, felt her heart pound. She knew Miguel was taking great risks, but she trusted his intelligence and the patience he had developed over the past days. Every move he made was precise and deliberate. Blinded by rage, Ricardo did not notice that he was being led into a disadvantageous position. He shouted orders, tried to control Miguel and the ranch hands, but frustration grew with every failed action. Desperation clouded his judgment, making his moves predictable. Seeing the perfect moment, Miguel intervened quickly and decisively. He redirected the group of ranch hands to protect Beatriz while maneuvering the situation, so that Ricardo would exhaust himself emotionally and physically. Every step was calculated, every decision precise. As the rain began to fall, heavy and relentless, the tension reached its peak. Beatriz, protected by Miguel's actions, finally breathed a sigh of relief, realizing the young man had managed to control the situation without any real danger reaching her. Ricardo, soaked and exhausted, still tried to regain control, but now his authority was shaken. For the first time, he felt vulnerable, realizing that Miguel was not just a pawn, but someone capable of turning the game with intelligence, courage, and strategy. Helena, observing everything from a distance, smiled silently. Every movement had unfolded exactly as planned. Ricardo's desperation, Miguel's patience, and Beatriz's protection created the perfect scenario for the next decisive steps. And as the storm raged over the farm, the sense that the tide was about to turn became tangible. Miguel knew the path ahead was still dangerous, but he also felt that he was finally beginning to control his destiny and protect those he loved. Night fell slowly, painting the sky in shades of violet and gray. The rain still fell intermittently, leaving the ground slippery and the atmosphere thick with tension. Miguel walked through the corrals, evaluating every critical point of the farm, now aware that his patience and intelligence were beginning to pay off. Every step Ricardo took, every impulsive reaction, was an opportunity that could not be wasted. Ricardo, exhausted and irritated, stomped across the property. His anger grew with every failure of his schemes, and the feeling of losing control began to erode his confidence. "This can't be happening," he muttered to himself, frustrated. "Miguel can't always be one step ahead." Meanwhile, Helena acted more directly. She discreetly summoned a few trusted allies, giving instructions to manipulate information and documents that could favor Miguel at key points across the farm. Each move was careful, silent, yet decisive, ensuring that Ricardo continued to act on impulse, unaware of the web forming around him. Miguel, attentive to every detail, began consolidating his strategy. He knew it wasn't enough to simply react to Ricardo's traps. He needed to create conditions to completely turn the game in his favor. He studied the farm's vulnerable points, the paths that could be used to distract and confuse Ricardo and his most loyal allies. Beatriz, nearby and watching, felt her heart race. She understood the complexity of the plan Miguel was beginning to execute. Every action he took required intelligence, patience, and precision. She discreetly held his hand, a silent gesture of support and trust. Ricardo, on the other hand, was starting to crumble. His impatience made him increasingly predictable. Every move made by Miguel and Helena's allies seemed to anticipate his actions, leaving him nervous. "How?" he muttered under his breath, unable to comprehend how quickly he was being outmaneuvered. Miguel seized the advantage. With subtle gestures, he guided Ricardo to a part of the farm where the terrain was more uneven and the weather more unstable. He knew Ricardo would react impulsively, trying to regain control. When he did, Miguel positioned the loyal ranch hands to ensure no real harm occurred, but enough to destabilize his opponent emotionally. Helena, observing from a distance, noticed the strategy's effectiveness. Every piece moved at the right moment, increased tension, and weakened Ricardo's dominance. She smiled faintly, pleased with how the plan was unfolding. It was a silent game of power and intelligence, and every detail was under her control. As the storm continued, Miguel felt determination growing within him. He knew the path ahead was still dangerous, but the realization that he could begin to control his own destiny and protect Beatriz was empowering. Every decision made at that moment solidified his position, and every reaction from Ricardo became predictable, rendering him vulnerable to future moves. And so, in the dim light and under persistent rain, the Valenka farm became a silent battlefield. Love, ambition, strategy, and secrets intertwined, setting the stage for the decisive confrontation yet to come. Miguel knew that every step was crucial, and that the ultimate turning point would demand courage, intelligence, and absolute precision. The sky hung heavy, almost black, and the rain poured relentlessly over the farm, mixing mud, wind, and the scent of wet earth. The atmosphere felt electrified, as if every lightning strike heralded the confrontation that was about to unfold. Miguel walked steadily through the corrals, each step measured, each breath controlled. He knew that this day would determine not only his position, but also the fate of Beatriz and the farm itself. Ricardo, desperate and exhausted, stomped across the grounds, unaware that every one of his actions was being anticipated and countered. His arrogance had given way to frustration and insecurity, making him more vulnerable than ever. "This can't be happening," he shouted, his voice thick with rage and disbelief. "I control this farm." Miguel knew that sheer strength alone would not decide the outcome. His patience, strategy, and intelligence, honed over the past days, would be decisive. He subtly guided Ricardo toward an area where the natural obstacles of the farm and the heavy rain created a tactical advantage. Every step was planned, every movement deliberate. Beatriz watched from her hiding place, her heart racing. The tension was palpable, and the fear that something might spiral out of control mixed with quiet confidence that Miguel was prepared. She discreetly held his hand, a gesture brimming with complicity and hope. Helena, observing from a distance, intervened decisively. Strategic allies were positioned, documents carefully revealed, and crucial information about the inheritance came to light, showing Ricardo that not everything on the farm was under his control. Her silent manipulation had created the perfect scenario. Miguel now had not only strength and skill, but also the advantage of truth on his side. Realizing the shift, Ricardo panicked. Every step he took seemed to lead him further into error. "How? How is this possible?" he muttered, unable to comprehend that the game was turning against him. Miguel seized the opportunity. With precise movements and swift decisions, he neutralized any immediate threat and exposed Ricardo's vulnerability. The rain mingled with the tension, making every moment more dramatic. Even the ranch hands who had once supported Ricardo began to question his orders, recognizing Miguel's superior skill and intelligence. Beatriz, finally closer, witnessed the moment Ricardo was defeated, not by force, but by strategy, patience, and courage. Every action Miguel took had been carefully planned to protect, conquer, and reveal the truth that had been hidden. Helena, smiling quietly, saw her manipulation bear fruit. Miguel now controlled not only the movements on the farm, but also the course of the story. Ricardo, humiliated and defeated, finally understood that true power does not reside in wealth or strength alone, but in intelligence, courage, and justice. At last, the rain began to ease, leaving the land wet and the atmosphere calmer. Exhausted, Miguel looked at Beatriz and smiled, feeling a quiet yet profound victory. "We did it," he said, his voice firm but laden with emotion. Beatriz moved, approached, and embraced him. "I knew you could do it," she whispered softly. "I've always believed in you." Ricardo, humiliated and ashamed, retreated, experiencing vulnerability and helplessness for the first time. He had underestimated Miguel, ignored Helena, and lost control. The lesson was clear. Ambition without strategy and empathy leads only to defeat. Helena, satisfied with how events had unfolded, continued to watch, aware that the balance of the farm was now in the right hands. Miguel had proven that courage, intelligence, and patience were far more powerful than wealth or brute strength. And so, as the rain diminished and the first rays of sunlight appeared on the horizon, the farm breathed a new air of justice and hope. The love between Miguel and Beatriz, Helena's quiet wisdom, and Ricardo's defeat marked the end of a story of challenges, intrigue, and triumph. A chapter closed, but with the promise of better days, where true power resided in the courage to fight for what is right.